Good morning. Thank you for joining. Today we're going to go over MYOB Advanced 2018, the distribution module, in particular focusing on the distribution side of things. I am going to use a few slides at the beginning and then I'll be using MYOB. First of all, in terms of how to get at further information, just in case you didn't capture this the last time, you would have received the email in the last one in terms of the webinar, access to the webinar, but we also have access to the webinar via our leverage support. That's leveragetechnologies.freshdesk.com. If you have any issues with accessing the portal there, the support portal, please contact us on our normal number, 1300 045 046. And MYOB has also provided a new website. It's called the MYOB Academy. It's at academy.myob.com. And to get at the advanced side of things, obviously /advanced/AU. Okay, with the MYOB Academy, you do need to register, and it's got two-factor authentication on that, so you'll need to go through that process as well. But on Monday, we thought we were going to be upgrading this week. But as you are aware, the upgrade has been actually postponed till next week. I think MYOB has notified you all about that. The primary concern that MYOB had was in relation to security. And this particular slide here, I just want to go into a little bit to explain what was actually occurring. So I'm going to talk about a particular screen. If I add a new screen to the MYOB Advanced menu, let's call it the sales history pivot table in this instance, the system by default will set all the access rights to all the roles as being not set. What that means when all the access rights are set to not set is that basically it means everybody has access to it. Now, normally, that's not a problem because usually the higher level menus are blocked. It basically means you might have access to it if you could get at it, but because it's behind a locked door, you can't get at it. There is some technical ways of getting at it to circumvent that door, but it's pretty technical. But in MYOB Advanced 2018, if you've got access to be able to edit the workspaces, but only administrator roles can do that, you can then put that menu item into the workspace and you have access to it, even though it's not desired that you do not have access to it. So that's that was the basic reason MYOB postponed it till next week. What we've done is we've created a new report to show all the screens where the access is not set. And there'll be somebody contacting you before next week's upgrade to ensure that there's no holes in your security at this point in time. So especially the ones that we're upgrading next week. So we have a special little report that's set up. It's called Access Rights by Screen Not Set. That actually shows you this. In most instances, it relates to just any new inquiries that have been set up in the system. So that's the primary violation there. We can come back to that at the end of the session. We can have as many questions as you wish on this. I just want to go into a couple of areas where MYOB have changed the way postings to inventory occur so as to basically give you a clearer indication or alignment of financial periods and things like that. So there's been a number of small background changes. The first one is probably the most important, and it relates to basically what MYOB says in the release notes. If an inventory issue cannot be created for the sales order invoice for some reason, the system does not release the invoice. So previously you could actually release the invoice, but the update to IN was either not created or it was not released. So if it can't create that inventory transaction now, it won't release the invoice. And basically, it prevents the release of AR invoices when an IN transaction was not created. And so you don't have to go back and check that everything has been, the IN transactions have been all released. You don't have to go back and check that the IN transactions were not created. The same applies for mass processing operations, such as if you're releasing invoices in batch. And then there's a few other tightening of control that they've done there. So what they've done is it will not let you create an inventory issue, transfer, or adjustment that decreases the item's quantity directly in the inventory module if the issued quantity exceeds the available for issued quantity. Okay, so you have to read this a few times to actually understand exactly what it means. But basically, if you have, say, 20 on hand, and you've raised a shipment then for, say, 10, the system will prevent you, but you haven't released that you haven't done the invoicing for that 10 yet that you've got on the shipment. System will not let you go in and do a inventory transfer or an inventory issue for the balance, which is 10. So it won't let you take 12 out because it says no, you can't do that. The available for issue, which is the on hand minus the ship quantity, okay, you haven't got sufficient in there. And then further to that, what they've done is when an inventory issue is created from a shipment or from an invoice and is saved from the balance with the balance status, the system does not change the inventory's allocation type to IN issues. This is just a further control in there. And the last one is the include quantity on return setting now affects only the calculation of the available quantity. Previously, if you do some returns, then the available for shipping actually increased when in actual fact that quantity on returns hadn't been fully processed, and it could mess up your view of what you have available for shipping. It's a little bit complex. We could probably spend a half an hour just going over this one topic, but it's all covered in the release notes. I've just taken small bits out of this, and it's mainly what happens in the background. And one other thing that MYOB have done, this is more of a setting, is that they've enhanced the processing of posting to inventory, especially in regards to financial periods. So they've incorporated a new setting. This is the setting number 1 down the bottom, which is basically saying I want to align the posting period on the inventory transaction with the AR invoice. So you don't end up with shipments occurred in this month, invoicing occurred in next month. Now previously there was a way of doing that, which was the second option, which is use ship not invoiced account, where you could ship it, it would go into a clearing account until it was invoiced, then it would be posted at that point, the actual general ledger journal. So I think some of you will make use of this. I'm now going to now proceed on to the next area, which is actually dealing with item classes and item class hierarchy. So previously, the item classes was just basically a single level item class. But with the 2018 release, you can now set up as many levels as you wish. In my case here, I've set up a class and a brand. So the example I've got here is different types of computer equipment, but this, you could call it the subclass, is actually the brand. And what's the impact of this? It's primarily around reporting and analysis. And in this case, this is just a pivot table where I'm reporting by the type of equipment and then by the brand of equipment. So I'm going to go into MYOB Advanced now and show you how this is set up. Here's MYOB Advanced. And in relation to this item class feature, which I think quite a few of you will make use of this, because it does really give you a lot better dissection of your sales or your purchasing, whatever you wish in terms of your inventory. So the first thing that needs to be done is you need to tell the system what are the segments that make up your item class. So you've got up to 30 characters to use here. You've got different lengths of each segment. And so in my case, I've said the first segment is a length of 6 and the second segment is a length of 4. And for those of you who are familiar with sub-accounts, it's the same sort of concept as the sub-accounts where you have the different segments there. You can set up validation, you can set up auto-numbering, and in this case, I've set up a set of different brands here. So I've got AMD, Dell, Fujitsu, HP, Intel, Lenovo, and things like that. Then you need to set up the item classes. And in this case, I've set up different item classes. Here I've got different boards, but then I have it broken down into the different brands of the boards. Here I have different laptops broken down by the different brands of the laptops, cables, and so you can go 2 levels, you can stay at 1 level, you can go down whatever fits in those 30 characters. And then for each of those subclasses, you can set up the defaults in terms of what the item type is, what the posting class is, whether or not it's serial track, what's the default units of measure, replenishment settings, attributes, all of that. Now, previously on the item class, there were availability calculation rules. Now, this has actually been separated out now. So you can apply the same calculation rule across multiple item classes. It's very similar to what you had previously, but it's just separated out now, and you can apply it to multiple item classes then. The end result of this is then that we can do a sales history pivot table. In this case, I'll go over here. Or you can do whatever analysis you desire. If you export it to Excel and use the OData connection, you could do it there as well. And just bring this up. So here I've got a very simple analysis by customer, by item class, by the brand. Okay, obviously I can fiddle with this pivot table just like an Excel pivot table, but it just gives us a nice breakdown of our sales by these different classes. In this case, instead of introducing the customer, I've taken the customer away now. So that concludes that little bit on item classes. If we have some questions, we'll have time at the end to go back to this. Next area is what's called advanced processing of sales order invoices. So this is a feature that needs to be turned on if you want to make use of this. But basically what it lets me do is in the invoicing screen, the SO invoicing screen, previously I was not able to just process a invoice for a inventory item. In this release, you can now do that. Okay, so you can have a line that refers to an order and just go straight into sales orders and process it there, or you could go into the sales order invoices and just raise an invoice without any reference to the sales order. In addition, you can also put negatives in here. So in one document, you could do a return of one item and a sale of multiple items. And you can do the same thing on, for instance, a credit memo. With a credit memo, you may be returning 4 items and giving the customer back 1 item. So you can do that. As long as the total for an invoice is a positive and the total for a credit is a credit, then we're all good there. So I'm going to go back to sales order invoices in MYOB and show you this. So here's our invoices, and what I have is the list view here. So I'm using the modern user interface here, and in this case I've got my default is set to just show me everything that's not complete. It's much quicker than bringing up hundreds of records. So I want to add a new sales order invoice, choose a customer, okay, put in the branch, choose the inventory items, I want to sell 4 of those, and for whatever reason the customer may have brought back 1 of them, so I'll just put a -1 in there. But if you want to, you can link it to any open sales orders. In this case I don't have any here. You can do that on a line-by-line basis, and then all I do is save it and release it, and the transaction's completed. The invoice has been, the inventory has been reduced, there's been 1 returned, and 4 have gone out. So fairly straightforward. The background to this actually came because of they needed a more straightforward way to link to point of sale solutions. So with integration, you want to link to point of sales, but you don't want to go sales order, shipment, invoice, point of sale. Transactions happen at the counter, and you just want to process the paperwork. I'm going to go back now to the PowerPoint. This next area, it could be quite useful for a lot of distribution companies. It's called quick processing of sales orders. So I'll give you an overview in PowerPoint, and then I'll show you where everything occurs. At the order type level, in the order type definition, you can say, I want to allow quick processing. Allow quick process. Then you can actually say what you want as a default for the quick processing. So you can say, I want to, there's some general settings at the top here which says open all created documents in new tabs. So if you initiate quick processing for a particular order, it will open up the pick list in a tab, and a shipment combination in a tab, or an invoice in a tab. It'll also download order created print forms. So they're all downloaded automatically for you. Then you can elect to say which of these do you want to occur. Do you want to create the shipment? Do you want to print the pick list? Do you want to confirm the shipment? Do you want to print the labels? So you can go down as far as you want. There is a new setting that MYOB they're not making use of this yet, so I expect it'll be coming very shortly. It's called using a device hub, which is going to be very useful because you may want the pick list to be printed out in the warehouse. You may want the confirmation to be printed out in the dispatch office in a different printer. You may want the invoice to get printed out in the finance area. Okay, so it basically lets you set up different printer locations. Then on top of that, if you're running in a multi-warehouse situation, then or a multi-branch situation, you actually may have central sales, but you may have distributed warehouses. So you may want or distributed branches. So you may want the pick list for this particular branch to print out in Perth, the Perth warehouse. When you're processing another branch's order, you may want to go print out in the Melbourne warehouse or the Sydney warehouse. So it's very useful, something I've been looking forward to for quite some time. So I'm quite excited about that. And then what actually happens, if you've enabled the quick processing, the sales order screen has a new button called Quick Process. So once you've completed your order, or got your orders ready for it to go, you can just click Quick Process. It comes up with a confirmation screen. Obviously, if a sales order is across multiple warehouses, you need to run this multiple times. It tells you what date you want to use, today's date, tomorrow's date, some custom date. It tells you the availability of all the items on the order. And then you can elect to change the defaults that you previously had. Once you click OK, then it will go through the process. You confirm the options here. I'm going to go back now to MYOB and show you how this runs. So first of all, on the order type, we have this thing called Allow Quick Process. So you won't see this unless you turn this on according to the order types that you are using. Then, as part of the administration, you say, well, for this type of order, I want to do this, this, and this. Okay? So you may not want to go all the way to the preparation of the invoice. It may be just as simple as creating the shipment and printing the pick list. You just want those two things automated, or printing some labels as well. And then once that's all been turned on, if I go back to my sales order and I go sales order here, again on my sales order list view, what I've done is I made the open sales orders as my default. I don't really want to see all my closed sales orders. I may want to look at my due and overdue orders just so I can focus on the exceptions. I'm just going to raise a new order in this instance. Normal thing, choosing a customer. And this is an example quick process. I'll just actually just add a stock item here. Choose these items. So I want some of that. I'll just choose the one warehouse here just to keep things nice and simple. Just 3 rows there, and I want 2 of those and 3 of those. Oops, I added 1 too many that I started entering earlier. Okay, and I can save it, but I could just go straight into quick process. And what it's going to do, it's going to look at it and say, oh, you've only got Melbourne Warehouse, so that's an easy decision. There's Melbourne Warehouse. Defaults to shipping today. And it defaults to all the settings that I had there previously. So I just click OK, and it's going to start processing this document now. And as it goes through, it notifies you that the shipment's been created. And what it's doing is it's creating new tabs here now with all the different documents. There's my pick list. There's my shipment confirmation. Okay, there's my invoice. There's my invoice. There's my actual invoice print. There's my invoice. There's the actual issue of the issue that was created. There is the shipment confirmation. There is the pick list. And there is the shipment. And it's all basically done the job that I've asked it to do. So could be very useful for some of the clients. You may not go as far as what I did here, going all the way through, but it's available for you. We move on to a few other topics. Here is purchase orders, and it's called retainage. For those of you that were here on Monday's meeting, then retainage, we went over that for accounts receivable and accounts payable, but retainage could be set up on the purchase order. So on the purchase order, there's a tab called Other Information, and you can enter the amount of retainage you want there. Oops, let's go back. At the row level, you can set up the supplier with a default retainage. That's optional. But if there is a default retainage on the supplier, it's going to come through to the purchase order. You can override it at the order level, and you can override on the PO line level. You may have retainage on some rows, but no retainage on other rows on the purchase order. Let's go over to purchasing now. With a purchase order, if I add a purchase order here, I put in ABC Studios, then in this case AB Studios doesn't have retainage, but I can add in 10% retainage. Oops, I might use a different one here. The reason I'm using a different one here is that at the supplier level, not only do you need to set up the apply retainage, but you also need to set up the general ledger account where you want the retainage to be held. So I'll just set that one up. And I'll create a new purchase order here. And there, it automatically comes across. Then at the row level, if I'm purchasing some goods here, automatically what will occur is I've got my retainage here. 10% retainage amount $3. The the amount on the row then is $27. If I'm purchasing 100 of these, then everything gets recalculated there. But if you, for whatever reason, you decide I'm going to use a different percentage, you can override it there. And then it flows through receipting and then to accounts payable. When you process accounts payable, you'll only pay the difference, which is the $3,300 there. It'll take the retainage off the total and then be held in a particular account until you release the retainage, and then you pay the balance. Moving on, is the next topic is what they call non-invoiceable expense lines in dropship purchase orders. Now, this has been a topic for anybody who's been using drop shipments. So with a drop shipment, you raise a sales order and you say, oh, I need to drop ship this directly from the supplier to the customer. But then the supplier turns around and charges you some additional charges. Okay, and then what would happen previously, the system would let you put in those additional charges there, but when you came to actually do the invoicing, it would give you a problem. It wasn't able to handle that additional charge. It expected all the rows on the purchase order, on the receipt actually, to be invoiced. With 2018, that problem basically goes away. You can add as many additional charges as you wish to the purchase order, and the invoicing will no longer have a problem. Move on to the next one here. And this is units of measure and pricing improvements. So there's been a number of, for your selling prices and actually your buying prices. Now what you can do is you can set up different prices per warehouse. So in this case, what I've got here is my normal price for this is $45 AU. I've got different currency prices. That's always been a feature there. But then what I've done is that for my Perth warehouse, if I'm selling out of my Perth warehouse, I am going to charge my clients $55 rather than $45. Same on the vendor pricing as well. So vendors may charge you different prices for delivery into different warehouses. So East Coast of Australia versus, say, Darwin or Perth or whatever. I'll show you where that is set up. Okay, but before I do that, one last thing on the distribution and the units of measure and pricing improvements. Previously, you could set up different prices per unit of measure. Okay, so if you sell a individual unit for $10 and you could fit, say, 64 of those on a pallet, you could actually go and say, well, if I sell it in a unit of measure of pallet, then I'll give the person a different price. Along those same lines, what they've done is instead of having to set up the prices at the different unit of measure level, back on that previous screen here, where you got different units of measure here, what you could do is you could set up a multiplier instead. Okay, so basically instead of, in this case, I'm selling just processors, so I can fit a whole lot on a pallet. So I've said the multiplier is 600, where I can fit 640 units onto a pallet, but I've used a multiplier of 600 rather than setting up special discounting or special unit of measure pricing. I've incorporated it directly into my conversion factors. Show you how that all works. I'll just close some windows here. So under inventory, receivables first. And if I look at my sales prices, in this case, I'll just look at my base prices, and I'll just look at one particular item. So in this case, as I had it on the PowerPoint, my normal price for this particular item is $45. But in this case, what I've done is I've said my perf price is $55, so I marked it up $10. And if I wanted to, I could also set up a perf pallet price. So now I've got a perf pallet price, a perf normal box price, and the normal warehouse price. So I'll go over, and if I look at the item, I've got a multiplier of 600 here as well. Okay, so if I'm selling pallets out of any other warehouse other than perf, it's going to use that multiplier. Sales orders. See this in action. I'll add a new one here. I'll bring in the CPU, and by default, this is coming out of the Melbourne warehouse, 1 unit, easy, $45. Same item, same order. I'll have to sell them something out of the Perth warehouse as well. It's $55. Same item, but I'll sell a pallet in this instance out of the Melbourne office. I'll choose a pallet, and it's $17,472, which, if you do the maths, and then the last one is CPU, perf, in this case, a pallet from perf, and it's $25,000. Okay, so fairly straightforward. Let's move on to next topic here. Oh, okay, so that basically covers nearly all the distribution topics. There are a few other smaller ones available in the release notes. As I said, they are here. Feel free to contact us directly about any of these topics. Well, I think that's it. That's it for today. Thank you again for your attendance.